the simple two-party cases to complex cases. As the 89th president of the California Judges Association, he founded its Mindfulness and Wellness Committee and has been speaking and writing on this subject for attorneys, law firms, bar associations, and judges at conferences and webinars throughout the United States. Judge Bacigalupo has spent his career mentoring attorneys who aspire to get appointed to the bench and is the founding chair of the California Judicial Mentor Program, a partnership between the governor's office and, I'm sorry, let me clear that. Okay. Between the governor's office and the judicial branch. He's also a former elected co-chair of the judicial branch's bench bar coalition. While in private practice, Judge Bacigalupo handled a vast array of cases such as construction, business litigation, employment, insurance coverage, product liability, personal injury, and toxic torts. I have the pleasure of having Judge Bacigalupo as a colleague at ADR Services, where he joined in 2024, and where he handles mediations, arbitrations, judicial reference, and special master cases. We also have the pleasure of having Anthony Khoury with his effervescent personality. He's a full-time neutral, currently serving on the mediation panels for the Mediation Center of Los Angeles, or MCLA for short, Alternative Resolution Centers, ARC, and the American Arbitration Association. He has more than 20 years of experience in the legal industry, culminating most recently with a position as a court commissioner in Kern County, where he presided over very diverse calendars. During his time on the bench, Anthony created a civil mediation program for limited civil, small claims, unlawful detainer, and civil harassment matters. Prior to taking the bench, Anthony ran a successful law practice for over a decade, specializing in civil, business, and employment law litigation. Since leaving the bench in December 2022 to become a full-time neutral, Anthony obtained an LL.M degree from the Strauss Institute of Dispute Resolution at Pepperdine University, Caruso School of Law, and he was elected to the SCMA Board of Directors in December 2024. Anthony is an adjunct lecturer in law at USC School of Law, teaching arbitration, and is also an adjunct professor of law at Pepperdine Strauss Institute, where he lectures on employment disputes. Anthony has given numerous presentations on mindfulness in mediation, is a certified yoga instructor, and served on the California Judges Association Mindfulness and Wellness Committee alongside Judge Bacigalupo during his time on the bench. Gentlemen, I'm honored to have you guys as our speakers for this, presentation. Please proceed.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Thank you. I can't think of anyone better than you to lead the inaugural committee of the San Fernando Valley Bar ADR section. We are thrilled that you're there, and we're really grateful to Steph and to Linda for giving us the support to do this. Thank you, Anthony, for popping up that first slide. That's the title of today's program, and we'll go to the learning objectives of it, and they are a few of them. So we hope to achieve and accomplish some of these objectives. And I first want to mention it's wonderful to see a number of my colleagues, some of whom were members of the CJA Mindfulness and Wellness Committee, as well as friends and colleagues who are here today. But we want to have you walk away from this by understanding some strategies that will help you for emotional regulation. And a lot of that is rooted in mindfulness-based communication. And also the key, of course, which is part of the kind of a bit of what the title of this program is, which is when conflict gets chaotic. Well, that also happens when there's impasses in the course of a mediation or of a proceeding. So we want to talk about that. We have a lot of content that's really helpful on tools on how to get over impasse. And then there's going to be two what we're calling mindfulness techniques. And really what they are is it's a breathing exercise to get us started today. in kind of the same space so that we can all proceed, with a sense of calm and serenity. And then finally, we want to talk about how to be really the best version of yourself, and giving you some tools on how to look at that. So the first thing what we're going to do is this breathing exercise. But before we actually go into that, and I'm going to guide you on that. But the first one is just something I want you to think about. And if you have a piece of paper, if you don't mind writing this down, it's called STOP. STOP. So what does this mean? It means wherever you may be, whatever mood you may be in, sometimes it's helpful to just stop for a second, right? Don't we say that a lot? What's going on? Stop. Sometimes people say, stop and think. Well, you know what? We're actually inviting you to look differently to that. We want you to stop. The S means stop. Pause whenever you're doing something or thinking. The next step is the T, take a breath. Remember how we often say, hey, breathe, just breathe. Well, this happens to me regularly. I'm breathing from up here, right? I'm not breathing like a big deep breath, right? Isn't it wonderful when you can have that big deep breath sometimes? And how people say, oh, it clears my head when I can breathe. So if you're feeling something where you need to stop and then you need to take a breath, well, next step is observe what is actually happening. When you take that deep breath, it kind of clears your thoughts, and it allows you to tap into what may be your emotions. Maybe something's triggering you. Well, then you've just observed it. You've identified it. So now go to the P, proceed, right? Because when you move forward after going through that process, you're able to say, oh, what's happening here is I may be getting angry. I may be getting agitated. I'm getting distracted. My mind is wandering. So anyway, you can always do stop. Just think about that, STOP. So next thing what we want to do is actually a very brief meditation. And it's called a body scan. And I want to thank UCLA Semel Institute. It's called the MARC, Mindfulness Awareness Research Center. So Anthony, if you could just show that breathing exercise slide, it's nice. And so, okay, everyone, we're going to do this. Now, you don't have to do it, but I'm just inviting you to join it. So let's do this. Begin by bringing your attention into your body. You can close your eyes if that's comfortable to you. You can notice your body seated, wherever you're seated. Feeling the weight of your body on the chair, or maybe you're on the floor. And take a few deep breaths. Inhale. Exhale. And as you take a deep breath, bring in more oxygen. Bring in the oxygen from deep into your belly. Inhale. Hold it up into your lungs, the top of your lungs. Maybe take another sip of air. And as you exhale, have a sense of relaxing more deeply. You can notice your feet on the floor. Notice the sensation of your feet touching the floor. The weight and pressure, vibration, heat. You can notice your legs against the chair. Pressure, pulsing, heaviness, lightness. Notice your back against the chair. Bring your attention into your stomach area. If your stomach is tense or tight, let it soften. Take a breath. Notice your hands. Are your hands tense or tight? See if you can allow them to soften. Notice your arms. Feel any sensation in your arms. Let your shoulders be soft. Notice your neck and throat. Soften your jaw. Let your face and facial muscles be soft. Then, notice your whole body present. Take one more breath. Be aware of your whole body as best you can. Take a breath. And then, when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Well, if you want to share how that felt, feel free to make a comment in the chat so that others might be able to see that. That will be great. And that is something, let's say you're trying to fall asleep and your mind is running around, planning, preparing, thinking about the past, the future. You know what? Do a body scan like that, and likely you will fall asleep very quickly. Anthony.
Thank you, Paul. So I always tell folks, that so the first time I actually ever met Paul, he actually gave a very similar breathing exercise at the beginning of a California Judge Association Mindfulness and Wellness Committee meeting. And as I always remind him, I had been, super busy day, running off the bench, trying to get in chambers to get on Zoom. I still had my robe on, this and that. And, Paul starts meeting with, okay, everybody, we're gonna do a breathing exercise. I'm like, oh God, what is that gonna do for me? Like, I have time for this, like some silly breathing thing, like whatever. And in the moment I said, you know what, just do what the man says. Just go with it. What's the harm? And I remember those were like the best 5 minutes of probably my entire week. And I was reminded, because it's funny how we initially might be resistant to doing this stuff, thinking, oh, it's some breathing thing. It's not going to help you. It is amazing how much it can help you. So I hope that you all gain the same benefit that I got out of it. And hopefully that will open up some further avenues for you. But anyway, thank you, Paul, for that. That was, as always, amazing. Okay, cool. So as Paul mentioned, it's not just about mindfulness in general as it relates to mediation. We also believe that what might happen in some cases is that you hit an impasse, or what you might perceive as an impasse during a mediation, and things might have already gotten chaotic or might then become chaotic. And mindfulness can help you perhaps even overcome those situations. And so that's why we thought it'd be important to talk about that within the scope of this presentation. So number one is trying to diagnose, is this really an impasse, or what is actually impasse, because sometimes it may be that we're misperceiving what's actually going on. So the actual definition of impasse is that it's a situation in which no progress is possible, especially because of disagreement. It's a deadlock, meaning you are done. You are truly done. There is no further progress made. Now, that may not necessarily mean that you may not be able to settle that case at some point, but at least at that time, within the scope of the mediation, you may be done for that moment. At which point you may decide, okay, I need to plant seeds for my follow-ups, maybe for a mediation proposal, whatever. But at least in that moment, you're done. What we want to help you with is trying to figure out when you maybe too quickly give up on a situation that is not quite yet at impasse, and maybe by being mindful, you can break through that. So, for example, in almost every mediation, and that may be whether it's, litigated case civil or family law even, or whatever it may be, that the parties are far apart in negotiations, with, pretty much every case, or they're refusing to make any offers whatsoever, meaning that like neither side wants to budge. You can't get anyone to give in whatsoever, and it's over basically at that point. So those are two different things. So be wary of that. Is when are they just far apart and you can still get them to move versus no, clearly that's it. Or perhaps parties are threatening to leave if blank happens, or if blank doesn't happen, for example, versus they're actually leaving. When somebody actually is like, no, that's it, we're done, I'm leaving, and you see them log off Zoom, that's to me the point where clearly it's over. But until they've left, nothing's over yet. So just, be careful not to be too quick to assume that when you start getting those threats, if you do, and hopefully you don't deal with that. I can't remember the last time, I don't want to jinx myself. I can't remember the last time that happened to me. But sometimes it does happen, you never know. So just be aware of that. And then finally, another example is, parties telling you that their bottom line is blank versus, no, this is like literally the last best final. Like, this is not, oh, I'm saving some for later or whatever. Like, no, this is actually the last best final. So that too, just, not to say that people lie or that attorneys lie or whatever the case may be, but, you are often going to get, well, listen, Anthony, Paul, I'm just telling you today, like, our bottom line is this, or this is not a 6-figure case, or whatever the case may be. This is a bright line for us, versus like now you're 6 hours in and you realize there probably is a little bit of wiggle room there. So again, don't be so quick to assume that you've gotten the actual, this is the bottom line and that's it. So again, just be careful of figuring out when it's just a roadblock you can get past, or it really is impasse. So our little like Family Feud, game show time is, and mind you, these are we didn't actually ask 100 people, but these are answers we've gathered over time. So this is participatory. Please feel free to chime in if you have others. But we asked 100 mediators, what causes impasse? So and this is no particular order. This is not in order by any means. But one reason is that parties' expectations are not being met. I mean, I think that's an obvious one, where folks come into the mediation, they're expecting one thing, and right off the bat they're getting basically cold water doused on them, which is one of the reasons I've always been a really big proponent of more holistic mediations, which is, I have to give credit to longtime experienced mediators like Steve Rotman and Mike Young, who have really pushed for more holistic mediations where you are not letting parties start with these huge gaps and then trying to make 50 rounds of negotiating. I often start my mediations with folks that don't know me by telling them that you could literally get anybody off the street to just sit there and go back and forth to each room asking for numbers. I mean, any idiot can do number shuffling. That's not what, why you're a skilled mediator. So, I always encourage folks to consider using that approach of trying to focus more on the bottom line, on where you're going, and not letting people start to give you these big, huge gap numbers and then have to make 50 moves to get closer together. So that's often one thing that happens, is the expectations not being met, or at least not being met fast enough. And that can lead to some potential impasse situations. Or
Anthony, can I interrupt
go
you
ahead,
for
Paul.
1 second?
Of course,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something where it's so helpful to achieve minor agreements because you can build from that, right? Ultimately, of course, disputants may want to have a lawsuit settled if that's where you're at. But there's other factors too, like in a business case, you've got individuals that may want to maintain a long-term relationship. So you're having to deal with relationship building and how to do that, right? Because if you can build some of those, put some of those bricks together, that serves as the foundation then to deal with the money. It makes it easier to get to. And finally, I want to mention, reframe it. Sometimes people understand this is an impasse, we're done. well, look at what's going on and reframe it somehow so that they don't see that you've got a stop sign there, but rather it may be a yellow light. It's just part of the journey of getting through the process. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. Another situation that might lead you to that potential impasse situation is high conflict personalities. And I specifically reference them as HCPs because that's a Bill Eddy term, which we'll get to in a moment. But you might have high conflict personalities running amok, and that's something that, and don't assume that's the attorneys, right? That could be the litigants, right? It could be the litigants, could be the part of the attorneys, could be a combination of all of that. Perhaps the mediator hasn't earned the full trust of one or both of the parties or the attorneys, and that happens frequently early on in your career. Which, you know, I'm in year 3, so I mean I'm still there, but you know, thankfully I've started to get, you know, regular repeat business, but I still deal with a lot of attorneys and parties for the very first time, and so it's a lot harder for them to trust you in whatever approach you're going to take with negotiating because they don't know you yet. So you have to be mindful of that could be at play. And I have to thank a dear friend of mine, Stephanie Blondell from the Strauss Institute, who had to remind me of that one day. She says, Anthony, these people don't know you yet. Like, they probably just don't trust you yet. Don't take it so personally. You know, it'll get better over time. And she was so right. But you know, consider that. Be mindful of that. Perhaps one or both of the parties might not be entirely committed to the mediation process, and they have ulterior motives. That happens a lot, especially when you have court referred or court ordered mediations where, you know, it's not like these people said, hey, we both want to go to mediation and spend $15,000-$20,000 to hire mediator, you know, John Doe, Jane Doe for the day. That's different. But when perhaps they've been ordered to mediation, the judge said, hey, you know what, this case should settle, you know, go to mediation. You know, maybe they're not entirely committed to the process. So again, be mindful of that when you're going back and forth with the parties. And then finally, just what we call bad behaviors by the parties, which we'll get into in a moment. That might be, you know, what's causing impasse, or at least getting you close to impasse. So the high conflict personalities I was referring to, that, like I said, is from Bill Eddy in his book, High Conflict People in Legal Disputes. Great book. Definitely recommend, you know, you taking a look at it. And he has, and actually Bill Eddy's written numerous books on conflict scenarios, whether it be in legal disputes or otherwise. Great author. He actually just spoke for us recently at a conference. And so this is a chart directly out of that book, and it talks about some of the high conflict personalities that you might deal with. And the only reason I put this chart here, Paul and I wanted to show you that the one thing that seems to be a you know, common thread is if you look at the bonding row, the third row down, bonding, you notice a lot of similarities no matter what type of personality it is, whether it's borderline, narcissistic, paranoid, etc. You see under bonding, reassurance, avoid confronting weaknesses, empathy, friendly tone. So across all of the different categories of high conflict personalities, the way you deal with them is somewhat similar. So again, if you start to diagnose that somebody might fit into one of these categories, it really is incumbent upon you in trying to salvage the negotiating process to figure out how to deal with those folks. And it may have to take different, you know, you may have to take different approaches to find the right tone, but a lot of the approaches that he suggests are common no matter what type of personality may be. And I know Paul also dealt with that for many years on the bench as well. It's not just mediation, but, you know, you have to figure out a way, you know, to get through a case. So that's just one thing we also suggest to look at, is it's not just about yourself and being mindful for yourself, but also being mindful of who you're dealing with and how to deal with them better so you can salvage the mediation process. Because ultimately, as the mediator, you are really in charge of that process one way or the other. Okay.
You know, there's no harm in taking a break. When you see the temperature escalating, it's like, you know, we're gonna do a 5-minute break, 10-minute break. It allows people to get better regulated, and then you can perhaps privately meet with that individual and just reassure them and do what you need to do to get them back into a space where their head and their mind is going to be in a more open way of dealing with the process.
And that's a great point, because sometimes we forget, especially when we're doing Zoom mediations, they don't know that you're not doing anything for a few minutes. If you feel like the parties both need a bit of a break or timeout, whatever you want to call it, they're in separate breakout rooms, generally speaking, right? Unless you do joint session. But if you leave the room, neither side knows what you're doing. If you find that you need 5 minutes for yourself or the parties need 5 minutes, turn off the camera for a moment and just step away. Nobody really knows what's going on during those 3 minutes, and it may be the thing that you need to do, whether it be for yourself or for the parties in that moment. You're not obligated to be literally running back and forth talking the whole time. Sometimes that may actually make things worse. So that's a great point, Paul. Okay, so our last game show part of this Family Feud is we asked our mediators, what are bad behaviors in mediation? So these are the things that you might see in mediation. You're like, oh my God, I just dealt with this attorney or this party or whatever, and you wouldn't believe what they did. And again, these are just some samples. So one that everyone deals with, I'm sure, quite often is parties making quote unquote insulting offers or taking offers personally, right? That's usually what people refer to as the insult rounds, right, at the beginning of the mediation, which is part of the reason why I love the more holistic approach to avoid that. To avoid the, demand is 7 figures and the first offer is $5,000 and everyone starts, threatening and this and that, whatever. It's the worst thing in the world. I can't imagine mediating that way. It's just painful. So that happens a lot. That's certainly bad behavior. Something maybe a different sort of take here. Attorneys being dismissive toward their own clients. How many times have you seen that before? Or maybe the clients are being hidden, and say, oh, well, if you need them on, I can bring them on Zoom really quickly for you. Just let me know and I will call them or something. And then, the person appears for like 2 minutes and then they're gone the next time you go in the room. Or maybe when they're in, the room, they're on Zoom, the attorney's telling him basically like, shush, shush, mediator doesn't want to hear all that. Ultimately it's their decision, right? It's their case. So I think that's something that does happen sometimes as well, that might cause issues is that type of bad behavior. Shooting the messenger, right? You're bringing in potentially bad news about the other side's negotiating posture. And now the attorney or the party's getting mad at you because you're the one delivering that bad news. So that may happen. Threatening to leave all the time, every round. Oh, that's it. If they don't do this, we're leaving. Oh, here we go. We're going to leave again. That happens a lot, especially, like I said, when you're doing the more traditional distributed bargaining, the back and forth, 20, 30 rounds or whatever it may be. And this one's probably my favorite, but the thing that I always hate hearing is we're here in good faith and they're not. I mean, it's like every mediation, somebody at some point is going to say that, right? Like it's like clockwork. And I get it, right? But also I kind of hate that, because it's just kind of like I'm the good guy, they're the bad guy, or the good gal and bad gal, whatever. Everyone looks at it so black and white. So again, these are just samples. I'm sure you all could come up with 20 other things. And I don't know, Paul, if you had any other ones you want to throw in there, but there's so many quote unquote bad behaviors that we see in mediation regularly. These are some examples.
Well, I'll just comment that so often in human affairs, before you can get to numbers, you have to deal with the emotion. There may be anger, there's pride, there's jealousy, things of that sort that are interfering with one's ability to really operate in good faith and really be constructive as it relates to the terms and conditions of what's at stake. But you've got to peel back and let people at least address some of those other emotions that may be driving. It could be driving the litigation. It could be driving the attorney-client relationship. You just don't know. But you also have to give grace to that. You have to let that be a part of the process. So it really requires the mediator to be open-minded, to be patient, and to be communicative.
Absolutely. And that is why Paul and I are big advocates of mindfulness, because mindfulness unlocks all of these things. So we start at the beginning, which is literally to give you the most basic definition of mindfulness. Because, I'm sure all of you have heard people just say, oh, be mindful of this, be mindful of that. And most people generally assume that just means be aware of this. And in some context, that literally could be what it is. Just be aware of this, be mindful of this. But mindfulness itself goes a little bit deeper. So one definition is, according to the American Psychological Association's Dictionary of Psychology, which is that mindfulness is awareness of one's internal states and surroundings. The concept has been applied to various therapeutic interventions, such as mindfulness-based cognitive behavior therapy, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and mindfulness meditation to help people avoid destructive or automatic habits and responses by learning to observe their thoughts, emotions, and other present moment experiences without judging or reacting to them. So it really does just whittle everything down to what are you doing in that very moment, and shut everything else around you off so you can just focus on what's directly in front of you. And it is sounds really easy. It sounds super simple, but it is incredibly difficult, which is why the breathing exercise that Paul did earlier, it is so instructive in understanding mindfulness, because I don't know how all of you felt, but I did it along with him. I closed my eyes, I started doing the breathing, and you just sort of like drift off to another place. And now, okay, you can focus in on just what is it that you're doing in that very moment, as opposed to all the 50 things that are usually going on in our heads, especially as lawyers, where as at least when well, I'm no longer practicing lawyer, and neither is Paul as far as I'm aware. But back when we were practicing lawyers, we're thinking about 50 different clients, and what happens with this trial and that trial, and I got to do 50 things tomorrow, and we're always thinking ahead to all these different things that we have to do, and it's really hard for us, to be able to shut everything off.
Let me just comment on this, because it goes to your last point. Our minds are constantly moving around. It's called mind wandering. That's normal. That's called being a human. And this mindfulness piece, though, is don't get too attached to those stories that you have when you're mind wandering, right? Because that's where you go deeper and deeper, and you kind of get away from something. You introduced a term in the prior slide, and it was called mindfulness-based stress reduction. That's called MBSR. And I'll just comment personally. Some people ask, how did I get onto this journey with respect to mindfulness and meditation, which they are different, by the way. Mindfulness and meditation are not the same. But there is a structured program that's internationally accepted, MBSR training. And so I went through that training. It was a 10-week program, and there's a lot of groups in Los Angeles. Insight LA is one of them, and they have faculty that do this training. It wasn't very difficult. It was like meeting once a week for a couple of hours, and we had this kind of training. But there's a lot of ways that you can go deeper into this that can kickstart your kind of a meditation practice, or at least get you in the right place of mind. There's a lot of apps that can assist you and give you guidance and tools on how to do this, because it just requires practice. That's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. And this next slide really just, briefly to highlight what we're talking about with mindfulness and lawyers. But in that second paragraph, you notice, and this is an article from Mark Fingerman and Ralph Williams that they wrote in 2016. So this dates back quite a bit. But what I loved about it is they talk about how all this multi-pointed attention that I was referring to means that you're not giving your full attention to just observing what's before you, and the unintended consequence that you are subject to missing information that is available and valuable. And so being mindful really helps you hone in on specific details that might be useful to what you're doing in that moment, especially as a mediator. Now, one really great study that we've both been familiar with for many years, that I've always loved kind of citing for, and I'll be honest, there are not a ton of studies involving mindfulness and lawyers specifically, but there are actually quite a few articles and studies involving mindfulness and judges, which I think is actually fairly instructive for mediators. And we have plenty others we could cite to, but we don't want to bore you with that. But this one I think is very important, and that was a 2011 study called Extraneous Factors in Judicial Decisions, where the three authors reviewed 1,112 rulings over 50 days during a 10-month span. It was 8 judges who presided over 2 different parole boards in Israel. And they found that the likelihood of a favorable ruling was actually greater at the very beginning of the workday or after a food break than later in the sequence of cases. And it wasn't just, anecdotal. They actually found that about 65% of the rulings were in favor of the petitioner at the beginning of each session, meaning in the morning, after breakfast break, and after lunch break. And they gradually decreased to 0 to 10% at the end of each session. So that just gives you an idea of something as simple as you're running low, as we say, running low on fuel. you're in an 8-hour mediation and everyone's getting their catered lunches, or if you're on Zoom, they're going and taking a lunch break, whatever, and you're just going back and forth, and you never stop for yourself to take water break, take a coffee break, get a snack, do something. That will wear you down, and you'll start to notice that maybe as the parties start to get more at odds with each other, it starts to wear on you more than it normally would, because you're not being mindful of your own needs in that moment. And so this study, I think, really hits hard at that point specifically. And I know, Paul, you wanted to touch on any of that from your own experiences as well.
Well, I can say that another piece of this study is that for jurists who are in the criminal law area with a criminal trial assignment, their sentencing tended to be more severe at the end of the day, when apparently their patients and other factors were contributing to more severe consequences for those appearing before them. So no, I think that's it in terms of the one comment I wanted to make there.
And then actually the great point about that is a lot of the other studies that I reference involving judges showed that using mindfulness helped reduce cognitive biases that perhaps they weren't even really aware of. And so that's why mindfulness can be great for so many different reasons, that of course being one of them as well. Okay, so I'm going to pass it back off to Paul to talk about different categories of mindfulness that can be useful to you.
Okay, so the next couple of slides that we're going to do is I just want to mention these, and it's going to include physical, emotional, spiritual, social, and mental. Okay, and so what I mean by that is in 2017, the American Bar Association conducted a national survey, and they issued a report in which the co-authors talked about the health of the legal system. And the conclusions were that they weren't great. The number of lawyers who were suffering from mental illness or depression was higher than the general population. Lawyers who were consuming alcohol, cannabis, or other substances was higher than the general population. So this study had some tremendous recommendations for law students, for law firms, for bar associations, for the judiciary, for everybody who's involved in the justice system, to take a look at what we call as the wheel of wellness. And that's why I mentioned these 5 or 6 areas, because it's about finding balance in all, so that when you look at all of these, you can recognize that, my physical resilience is okay, but I need help in some other areas. So let me just go through some of these, and feel free to put in the chat. Physical, right? Number 1, sleep, adequate sleep. We all know this is a crisis, getting adequate sleep. And for those that run on, fumes, well, that can catch up with you. And we see that. I used to see it regularly in the courtroom. And we can see it, for those that are working hard and they're on the road and they show up for a mediation. But anyway, it's that sufficient sleep. And that, of course, is so important, because we need that for cognitive functioning at our highest levels, right? Our brains need to have those rests so that they have sufficient oxygen. And in terms of regular exercise, Anthony, I think you mentioned earlier something about yoga. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, thanks for bringing that up, Paul. Yeah, so one thing, at least for myself, that I started to do, well, I've been doing yoga for many years, but I really sort of took it to another level when I became a mediator, and I found that it helped me immensely. I mean, immensely. I mean, I can't even really put into words. Not just practicing yoga myself, usually 5 to 6 days a week at the hot yoga studio, but also I then went through teacher training, got my 200-hour certification and another 60-hour certification for yin training. And so I teach as well. And obviously I get different things out of both. But I find that it really helps me balance myself out. If I have a mediation one day, the thing I'm looking forward to at the end of the day is, hey, I know when I'm done, I'm going to get to go to the yoga studio and just let go of everything.
Anthony,
And it really does help me.
can I ask you this?
Mhm.
Because so many people say, "Oh, I can't do it. I can't do that pose. I can't. I'm not flexible." And for those of us who wake up in the morning and my back hurts or my knees are sore, and I'm like, "Yeah, that's the last thing I want to do is go and stretch all of that."
Yeah.
What would be a suggestion to get people to just incrementally, little by little, do something that's stretching and getting your body more flexible?
That is a great question. And so I will tell you, when I when I was still up in Kern County as a commissioner, I would come down as often as I could on weekends to visit family or whatever. And the Hot 8 studio in Woodland Hills had opened, I think, a few months after I started up there. And initially, it was like, I can maybe go there once a week or once every couple weeks when I'm in town, and all I would do is yin. And yin is not generally done in the heat, so it was not as hot, let's say, as a normal yoga class there at the studio. But also, it was entirely on the mat. And frankly, if you want to just lay there the whole time in shavasana, then you could do that, and that's considered acceptable. That's fine. It's your practice. You could just lay there and breathe. And so it really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for more exercise, obviously I would recommend maybe adding in some power vinyasa practice or some other things, maybe even a Bikram class. But in terms of restorative, and you just want to go into the studio and maybe take some time for meditation, breathing, and to get into like the fascia and the connective tissue, yin is a great practice as well, which is actually what I'll be teaching this Saturday for the Southern California Mediation Association. So if anyone's interested, be teaching this Saturday at 1:30 for SCMA. We're doing a meditation, breathing yoga, yin yoga class. So I would recommend that if anyone wants to do yoga but more restorative, maybe a restorative yin type practice might not be a bad idea.
Right, and you don't have to go to a studio per se to do that. You can go
Correct.
online and find a YouTube. There's just hundreds and hundreds of examples. It could be from 5 minutes to an hour. So, if you're in your office and you need to take a break, kind of stretch, move around, pop on a YouTube and just you can do it guided so that it's not something you have to create, but it's already there. So the
Yeah.
next slide is the next area of the wheel of wellness. It's emotional. And the key here is look at in terms of managing your emotions, you want to stay positive. There's so much about positivity that keeps us healthy. Negativity, as we all know what happens, that can drag you down. It can get you in a funk, and it can be toxic because it wears on other people too. So one of the key things about your emotional uh, 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 maintenance is maintaining positive attitude. In some ways, how to do that? Practice gratitude. Be thankful. Be thankful of what we have. Be thankful about so many things in our lives that we might be taking for granted. How to do that? You can acknowledge it. There's actually gratitude meditations, but you can also journal. And when you write, for me, I like writing things out. It really sticks in my mind when I do that practice. But by maintaining a journal, that's one of the ways that we can really help ourselves stay in a positive state of mind. The next one is spiritual, and by this I don't mean going to church or singing in a choir, but that can be spiritual. But it's about developing a sense of meaningfulness and purpose in your life. It's about practicing joyfulness and being appreciative of the beauty and the gifts that are around us in our lives all over the place. And that's so important because we can also connect with others in that kind of enjoyment and joyfulness of a spiritual world. The next one is social. And, there are a lot of studies that examine long-term, longitudinal studies on individuals. What was the recipe? What was the key to their well-being? It's about staying connected. It's about being involved, which is the opposite of isolation. And so it's very easy in the practice of law and in judging to isolate and to be on your own. So this one is really important. It's about reaching out, and here we are. You know, we are a community here today that has come together to think of ways to improve our wellness, which includes mindfulness. And so the San Fernando Valley Bar Association is just a wonderful opportunity, an association that allows us to stay engaged. We may have community organizations, school groups, and other ways that keep us socially active and connected. So important. And if you have some suggestions, I encourage you put them in the chat so that we see what it is that works for you, because we all learn from each other. Uh, and the last one I want to mention is mental, and that includes mindfulness. But through this, we are able to improve our focus and stay calm, manage our stress, and it increases our self-awareness. And it gives us a new approach, a new perspective. So I mentioned here there's the United States military, the Army, a number of years ago, began instituting for all of its recruits through its training program a resilience through mindfulness training, right? If anything, we want a soldier who's on the battleground, or someone with their fingers on a drone, I guess, to be calm, focused, and aware of what's going on. And so, you know, it works for the U.S. Army. It works for a lot of big corporations who have wellness programs. So there's no reason why, if you're in a small law firm or even a medium or large law firm, you can establish these kinds of programs that improves morale. It improves the health of your institution, of those who are around you. So I just wanted to mention that one. And feel free to jump in, Anthony, before we get to our last couple of topics.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think everything you're saying is great. I will say one thing I maybe wanted to, I guess, dig a little bit deeper into on the mindfulness part as it relates to doing exercise. Because, you know, obviously we're saying, oh, you know, go do some exercise, go do yoga, go do meditation or whatever. And there's this, I guess, surface understanding of how that might help you, you know, just by having an outlet and, you know, and that's all correct, obviously. But the reason why, at least for me personally, I was able to take my mindfulness practice to another level was because, at least for myself, doing hot yoga specifically, especially if you're doing, like I said, a Bikram 26 and 2 practice, or, you know, maybe a high intensity power vinyasa practice or whatever, when it's 115 degrees and, you know, 35-40% humidity, you can only imagine what that feels like. You don't have time to be thinking about work, family, the Dodgers blowing another game last night, or whatever's going on in your life. The only thing you can literally focus on is, what am I doing literally at that second? You know, what is this posture that I'm doing? Okay, take it from this posture to the next thing, and to keep control of your breath. Like, literally the only thing you have control over is your breath. And so it really forces you essentially to be mindful, or you're not going to be able to get through the class. Like, you have to focus on what is in front of you and let go of all of your baggage, so to speak. And so that practice has helped me then do that in the mediation room, if you will, and to try to be able to translate that into my mediation practice. So, and I'm not saying everyone should just go now and jump into a 115-degree studio and do all that. That's not for everybody. But the point is that you find something like all of these different examples and suggestions that Paula just mentioned, to see what works for you, to help you then unlock that mindfulness practice that you can then use in the mediation room as well. And hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying is slowing down your thought process, and then becoming aware, which was what we were trying to do with the breathing exercise of your entire body. And you know, so I think it was 2 days ago, I was eating, and I took a bite of food, and I bit my lip. And I thought, oh no, why did I do that? What was going on? Okay, I was not mindfully eating. I didn't put the food in the back of my molars and chew it properly. I was just consuming, but I wasn't eating. I wasn't slowing it down. Okay, you can have mindfulness in making dinner, chopping vegetables, being focused, slowing yourself down and being in the moment. It could be while you're walking, when you're observing what's around you, and your senses all of a sudden are more acute in with smell and vision, right? It's about being aware of what your surroundings are and what's going on. So the last slide, or second to last slide, is authenticity. So wanted to close this one out before we talk about some of the tools to promote mindfulness, but uh, I know about some law schools that are actually teaching courses for law students to encourage them and to give them strength to be authentic about who they are. Because the practice of law for many can result in developing a personality that really is not congruent with who you are, with your personality, with your values. And it shows. I would see it regularly in the courtroom, where somebody was just uncomfortable about something and they weren't really finding their true voice. It's not easy to be an advocate and sometimes take a position that's contrary to what you really think, or against your value system in representing a client that wants you to take that particular position. Likewise, that happens in the mediation room, where we see individuals taking positions that really just are inconsistent with who they are, and so we just wanted to bring this slide up to remind people that, if you're feeling like I'm not off, it's not working for me anymore. What's going on here? Well, take a step back and look at yourself. Maybe you've lost your voice, and you've lost really the center of who you are and what's important to you. And then, find a community that can give you that strength and support, so that you can conduct yourself in a way that will really give you the joy that we all want to have, in just not the practice of law, but in our personal lives as well.
Okay, so now the grand finale. In addition to everything we've told you so far, is here are some specific tools to promote mindfulness. And so you'll notice that a lot of these things are tips we've already given you. But number one, do not take work in your personal life with you. Now, what we mean by that is when you go to the mediation room, and because obviously a lot of the time you're doing this on Zoom now, you could be in your home office. You could have your dog or your cat or your kids or your cell phone sitting next to you, or your neighbor, or whatever's going on, or you're thinking about other things that are not specific to what you're doing in that moment, and you need to be aware of that. And so by limiting those things, it really does help you be a lot more mindful about your mediation practice. But it's amazing how these little things can really distract us and make it harder for us to do our jobs. And we need to be at 100%, obviously, to be able to do our job successfully. Paul, did you want to add anything on that one?
No, go ahead. It's next
Okay,
one, please.
cool. I'll let you handle this one.
Okay, well, I think it's summarizing what I've been talking about, which is maintaining a positive outlook. And you have the choice on whether you want to react or respond. And giving a pause between that decision can sometimes make or break a deal, right? As you were saying earlier, Anthony, when people explode or something and they want to leave and they want to walk away, well, it doesn't have to be that way if you just respond and not be reactive.
Absolutely. And again, it's not always about you. So don't always think that when they're shooting the messenger, that it's about you. Because if you start to take it personally, then I think, things will go off the rails really quick. Take care of your mental health needs. I think Paul really already covered this really, really well, but yeah,
there is one thing I wanted to add to this,
please.
though, is that there is absolutely no shame in seeking professional help, because a lot of things that we're talking about, it's about our own selves, in terms of the work that we have to do individually. But it may require that you have to have some consultation with a professional. And so please don't be embarrassed about having to reach out for help.
Absolutely. Okay, again, something else we've already kind of, I think, given you a lot of advice about, but regular sleep, fitness, eat well, and take time off. I know, in fact, I'm gonna give a shout out to Wendy Kramer, who's a colleague of Paul's, and Wendy's amazing. She's been a media for many, many years as well. Many of you may already know her, but what she does before every single mediation is she meditates. She finds that for her, before every mediation, she needs to meditate to be at her best. I know plenty of other mediators who say, I will only do 3 bookings a week, or 4 maybe, or whatever, so I have a day off in between to be able to recharge and whatever. So you have to kind of know what works for you, but these are not trivial things. Like, I mean, if you run yourself into the ground, you're not going to really be at your best. I mean, it's just not humanly possible. So be mindful of all those things.
So I think, Anthony, with the appearance of Linda on the heels of 1:15, we're running out of time. Why don't you just
Sure, we're almost at the end. Yeah,
yeah,
we can
just
pull
roll
up
the
rest.
other ones that you have there.
Okay, so build a support system. Remember, you're not alone. That goes to the social mindfulness that Paul talked about. Be curious, meaning what is really going on. That sometimes is what unlocks the mediation, is understanding what's going on behind the scenes, maybe the things that didn't go into the mediation brief, so to speak. Be kind, courteous, patient, and humble. Can't emphasize that enough. Very, very important. Humility is a huge thing as a mediator. Practice self-compassion and grace. Let go of anger and learn how to calm yourself even in the midst of chaos, which is really what this whole presentation has been about. And I don't know if, Paul, that was the last one, Paul. I don't know if you wanted to mention anything
No,
about
I think
the
that's
last
it. I think
points.
we gotta wrap it up. But the next page has our email addresses, and I invite anyone to reach out. There were a couple of questions in the chat. There was somebody, Mark, you had asked about some reference resources. I'd be happy to talk to you about that. But if anyone wants to reach out, feel free.
Absolutely.
Well, this was just the most amazing presentation that I've been to. Honestly, so different, so refreshing, that we were not just talking about the mundane legal stuff. It was just personal to the human level, and I really enjoyed it. In fact, I almost fell asleep when I was doing the breathing exercise.
Then it worked. It worked, Steve.
No, for sure. I have to say that I'm not a how do I say it? I don't do meditation every day, but I try. So every morning, and one of the reasons, big reasons, is that my wife is really into this stuff, and so she makes me. So, did you do your meditation this morning? I'm like, oh, okay, I forgot. Let me do it again. So, and it honestly helps. I have to say, from a personal experience level, it really helps. So, thank you so much. This was a very, very refreshing program.
On that point, Steve, it does help, and it's really improves personal relationships when you can do it with another person.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Linda,
Thank
anything
you.
else we need to add?
That's it. Wonderful presentation. I think everyone truly now feels better. Lots of compliments in the chat box. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
We
all.
had a
Have
lot
a
of
great
fun.
day.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.